names here. Everyone's welcome, your kids, your dogs, whatever. So if people come in, disturb you, want to ask you for a biscuit or whatever, it's not a problem. Just get involved in that. Yeah, my name's Matt Phelan, Head of Global Happiness at the Happiness Index. We did a little test, and I hosted the first 8, I think, and then Rosey's hosted 2, and Rosey's basically better than me. So moving forward, I'm just going to do the intro, and Rosey's going to host. So just a bit of context. It's definitely at the Happiness Index. It's definitely moved towards return to work. So feel free to use our free version of Return to Work survey, and shout out now. Have we got anyone from Slater and Gordon on at all? I don't think we have, but it's quite big news, and it wasn't just the survey, but Slater and Gordon, which are one of our clients, used our Return to Work survey, and based on the data, it's in all of the law press today because they're a big law. They're going to be closing down their London office. I'll circular out the office, and I just did a post on that. I don't think the right debate is around whether it's office or not office. I think it's about vision and culture and trying to work out what the best work environment is. So I'm not saying that because I'm anti-office, but they've taken a data-driven approach to that. They've sent out the survey, they've looked at their data, and they've got to a decision on it. So I just thought I'd open with that because that's really what we're working on a lot at the moment. But I'm going to hand to Rosey, who's going to ask you all to do a quick intro before we get to our 2 amazing speakers that we've got this week. So over to you, Rosey, who's much better than me.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so I'm Rosey, Community Manager at the Happiness Index. Before I kick off, I just wanted to share one big announcement. We are launching, we want to find a way to link up our community through our events with kind of a physical community where we can continue on carrying on our conversations. So we've launched today a community called Happiness and Humans. Some of you might recognize the name from our big event last year. We weren't able to do it this year just with the capacity and everything and lockdown. So we've decided to let it live on in a virtual community on Slack. So I'm just going to share the link to join right now into the group. Feel free to join if you'd like. It's just a place where we can continue on our conversations around culture, happiness, engagement, all things HR, whatever you'd like. So feel free to join. Love to have you on. And
Rosey,
yeah.
Just on that, you're the first. All you here wants to get the link, so we'll be the only people in there. So yeah. At first, it'll feel like a party with no one in there. So feel free just to put some like small talk in there, so it looks a bit busy when we send out the big email.
Please introduce yourself to the group as well. That'd be great. I'd like to get that going so we can all connect with others and meet each other. So. Yeah, I guess we'll start off with some introductions. Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself? Did I catch you off guard?
Oh, there's me trying to message Slack first time on Google Meet.
You're on my screen.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Rosey. I'm Jen Workman. I'm from Arup, and I've been enjoying this meetup every Thursday, I think, since day one. So thanks for having me back, guys.
Of course. Natasha?
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha. I'm a People and Culture Manager for First, an events agency. This is my 2nd week. I really enjoyed last week. So yeah, I'm back again.
Thanks for coming back. Melanie, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while.
Making a lunch right now.
Sound might not be working. I hear sound but no words. Hey Mel, can you hear us? Uh-oh.
It sounds like an alien has abducted her.
I think so. Melanie, if you want to put an introduction to yourself in the chat, that might work. I don't know if your sound's working at the moment. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, guys. I'm People Operations at Unbabel, and currently with this lockdown, I will be starting a new challenge and Impossible as People Specialist. And it's my first time.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Prina, Devshi? Don't know if she heard me. Prina, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, I have to move on. Mark Thompson.
Very formal, Rosey Jarvis. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark from the Happiness Index. As Matt said, you can have children and anything else, but wearing caps back to front is not allowed by anybody on these groups. But nice to see everyone again.
Thanks, Mark. Sophie Clark.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I am head of people at Digital Theatre. We're an online educational resource for the arts. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Helen Gribble.
Helen's always making a lunch when we do this. She'll definitely be at the toaster or something.
Yeah.
I'm just working out how to put myself back on. Hi, everybody. Chief People and Legal Officer for One Pint Today, hospitality, private luxury. Hoping to have some bookings soon. Please all travel. Yeah, so it's been great to join most of these sessions over the last few weeks. So always fun.
Awesome, thanks, Helen. And Cran, welcome back. You were hosting a few weeks back.
Yes, sorry, I'll put my video on now. I was just eating lunch, but no, I'm glad to be back. I've had a couple of weeks off, and if you look at our employee voice data, you'll probably get a gist of why. And yeah, I'm Cran. I'm a HR manager at Frida Media, and we specialise in advertising and digital social media content.
Awesome. I think I've gotten to everybody. So I will hand over the introductions to our host today. Lalita, would you like to kick off?
Sure. I'm Lalita, and I work for a company called Deepmind, kind of owned by Google, so kind of in a really fortunate position to be with them. It's the first time that I'm joining, actually, and I promise that you will see me again. But super looking forward to kicking off this conversation with you all and hearing back from you too.
Thanks. And Gemma?
Hello everyone, I'm Gemma. I'm head of people at the Happiness Index. So I have the pleasure of working with Rosey, Mark and Matt. Oh, and Caroline as well. Caroline's on today. So yeah, I have joined before, but this is my first time being a speaker at one of these events. So looking forward to it.
That reminds me, I did skip over Caroline. I'm sorry, Caroline. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I think you missed Rosey as well.
Oh, sorry.
Other Rosey. I'm Caroline from the Happiness Index. So looking forward to today.
Thanks. And we have one more that joined just now. Kevin, I might catch you off guard, but would you like to introduce yourself? Might not be ready. All right, I'm gonna just go ahead and start off with our conversation then. This week we've gotten a lot of questions of like registration form about maintaining culture in a virtual environment, and a lot about returning back to work. And so we wanted to kind of centralize our conversations around that this week. So my first question to both you, Lalita and Gemma, is has your organization been maintaining the culture and keeping it alive during remote working in a virtual environment?
Do you want to go first, Lalita?
Yeah, sure. So something that's really important to Deepmind is, they're really people-centric, employee-centric. So it's really important that when we went to work from home, that everyone totally knew that it was still about them first. And so what we've been doing is kind of lots of communication, just keeping everybody, I guess, really reassured that the culture of like kindness, collaboration is all still very present and relevant, even when working from home. So there's been lots of communication around that. And I think one of the most, we got some really positive response when the business decided to share that the expectation of individuals is just, there is no expectation of output. which goes right back to that employee-centric. We are thinking about the person first, and the messaging has been put you first, put your family first. This is a global pandemic. It's beyond us as a company. It's impacting the world. So we're very, very mindful that you'll be having all this personal stuff going on, and you can't physically or even mentally be putting work first. So it's really kind of maintaining those comms throughout. We're doing loads of fun stuff too, and I'm sure we'll get onto it, but we split, I guess we've kind of looked at all the groups of people that would be quite significantly impacted. So looking at parents and carers, looking at managers, even looking at the people and culture teams. So kind of, I've just kicked something off, just how do we support HR in this situation? Because they'll be so inundated, emotional burden, physical burden, with having to be at their computers all day. So just to answer the question in a nutshell, it's really kind of really good, strong, improved communication, and just highlighting that the culture hasn't changed and trying to find tangible, practical ways to maintain that.
Lalita, just a follow-up question on that, because you're obviously part of Deepmind, which is part of Google. For lots of us who don't know from the outside, they work as one company, or do they feel like when you're talking about the culture, are you talking about a Google culture, are you talking about Deepmind culture, or a merge? Because it was 2014, was it, when I think the acquisition
around
happened?
then, yeah.
So can you just open that up a little bit for us? I think that's really interesting for a lot of the people on.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, actually. And yeah, from the outside, it probably seems like Deepmind is Google, but actually Deepmind over the last few years has really been striving to create a unique culture, kind of really create an independence for themselves as a business. So how it works practically is we are underpinned by all of the processes and systems that Google have in place. We benefit from everything that Google offers, but Deepmind in themselves, we are independent decision makers when it comes to how we can operate and interpret some of the policies. Now, during the pandemic, we've been having to align much more closely to Google just because it's kind of safer that way. But actually all other policies, and we will get onto it when we get to some of the other questions, but we are now thinking about how our policies will have to change when we go back, specifically because Deepmind is a unique business, and you know, we're 1,000 people compared to 100,000 people. You can't, it's not comparable. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, I've so many more follow-up questions to that, but I'm sure we're going to come back to it.
I did actually have a follow-up question to that as well. If you said you've got 1,000 people that you're communicating with, are you communicating with people on different time zones as well? Like, how do you maintain being able to communicate with people who are maybe just starting their day versus just ending their day?
That's a really, really good question. So we've got the majority of us in the UK, then we've got really small kind of subsets across the world. Probably our next biggest is the US. So we tend to communicate late afternoon UK time, just because we find we capture a lot of the people then. When we do our kind of live, we have a weekly meeting where it's hosted live by various people. That's late afternoon, again, to enable people to try and log in. We don't have that many people in Asia, so they aren't impacted necessarily, but everything's recorded. We nudge to some of our comms in other places too. So we'll mention comms in weekly newsletters, mention it in Slack channels. There'll be an email, it gets mentioned in the live feed. So hopefully nobody misses out, but also everyone feels valued enough that they get comms at a relevant time for them.
Definitely, definitely. Gemma, over to you.
Yeah, I agree very much with what you've said, Lalita. And the first thing I was going to say is that making sure that you're still connected to everybody and that you're still catching up in whatever way is unique to your company. So for us, we've always had a weekly meeting, so we're keeping continuity of all of the things that our people are used to. So the weekly roundup meeting still goes ahead, and then there's lots of added opportunities to connect. There's extra catch-up meetings and all company stand-ups that we've put in throughout the week, so that sometimes it's just teams that are getting together, and then other times it's the whole company, and it's not you know, necessarily a broadcast from the leadership team or an update. It's just to check in to see how everyone is and what they've been up to and how their weekend was. So it's literally just that chance to connect on the most basic human level. And then, like you said, there's some fun stuff added in there with quizzes and those kind of things that we try and keep the fun side alive and the social aspect as well.
Definitely. I think even before we were in lockdown, Gemma, we were kind of set up for you being able to share our employee voice feedback when you were working from home. We would go through it on Fridays and be able to hear from you through a video that you pre-recorded. So
so we're lucky that we sort of had all of those things already set up, like what Rosie's saying, and so we've been able to continue our usual sort of processes and practices that everyone's used to. And again, like with employee voice, we're obviously still collecting all that feedback like we always would, and going through that in a similar way to how we would do before lockdown. And so I think that keeping the things that have been really core to the happiness index, keeping those things going, I think is the trick, really.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I think to link Gemma's point on the weekly video that she does, just to bring everyone in on Lalita's point on time zones, because we work across different time zones, Gemma records the video. So actually, even if you don't make the meeting, you can still see Gemma's weekly 4-minute roundup on how we feel, because the day it's released isn't a day that Gemma works anyway. So I just wanted to chip that in, that actually having recordings of when the meetings are really useful for people that are working flexibly or remotely or from different time zones.
So with the next few months, looking ahead in the future of work, are you, Lalita, I'll start off with you, are you at Google DeepMind planning to return to the offices?
Not anytime soon. We've been told loosely that it will be the beginning of 2021. And I think that's because there's a real concern that even though the numbers and the kind of infection rate, etc., will reduce, there is still a risk, and you've got kind of a huge bunch of really talented people still putting themselves in harm's way. Sounds a bit strong, but that is the case, really. Getting on a tube, traveling here, traveling there. We've still got we've also got a lot of people that have actually gone home, so to their home countries outside of the UK, to work from there. So there is some of that stuff. When does the travel bans lift? What are the jurisdictional situations, and will they be able to get back? So again, thinking about the people first, it's about not putting undue pressure on individuals. Also, on a practical level, I think when you close, so DeepMind sits within Google's big building in King's Cross. I think it takes 6 to 8 weeks to kind of get a building like that back up and running. You've got to test all the systems, make sure everything's okay. So there's going to be a lot of that work, and we're already in contingency or planning for return. But it's quite a beast, the planning thinking. The return, I think, will bring up the same amount of issues, if not more, than going off working from home into lockdown anyway. I foresee lots of issues that we're going to have to grapple with as HR in itself, but business and community as well.
Lalita, on that point, we're starting to see in the conversations that we're having with companies a potential bullying culture on return to work. So you've seen it a little bit in football, where Troy Deeney, who's a Watford player, all the footballers are going back to train, but he has a son that's got asthma. So he's just saying, look, I'm not going to come back to work. And we're starting to see examples where managers are being told, you need to come back to set the example. But actually that might be a really bad example to set. Have you got any advice for companies in that situation? Because I know you go Google and you're in a very different situation. So if you were a HR person in that scenario, what would you do?
That is such a good question. I think DeepMind is it's such a different place in that those are the issues that we're not having to grapple with. So if that were the case at DeepMind, I think I would be advising that it's all about communication again. It's about being mindful, respectful of individuals, making sure that we think about everyone as an individual. Everyone has a personal circumstance. Everyone's got outside of work commitments, outside of work responsibilities that they will have to put first and foremost. And yes, to some people, their work, their job, their career is very, very important, but the reality of it is work is one part of your life. So I think it's about taking the well-being, the mindfulness, the mental health angle when it comes to talking about some of this stuff, and putting in some really rigorous and good training for managers themselves. So not even managers, but the leaders, there needs to be a conversation that's happening at the table of, yes, we want to create these role models, but isn't a true role model somebody that's true to their own situation rather than just presenteeism and being in the office? I think we've all proven that we can work phenomenally well remotely. I don't think it's easy for me to say this, and it's a sweeping statement, but businesses that are able to work remotely shouldn't be seeing too much of an impact in terms of their day-to-day, particularly service providers, advisors, consultancy. So those people can take some time and stagger their return. They don't need to create this kind of tiered system, I would say, managers in first, and that's going to drive everyone else in. What you're then going to find is people leaving their jobs. You're going to see some mental health issues really increasing. You're going to see all of the disciplinaries, grievances kind of spiking. So it's about getting ahead of it and thinking, how do we create a culture that really respects the situation outside of work?
Love that.
Definitely. Yeah, there's you put it so perfectly earlier when you mentioned like planning to go back to work is a beast of a job, because there are so many things to think about, and I didn't even consider really before, like even buildings are going to take weeks to deep clean or to set up safety measures. So when people do start returning to work, and also thinking about mental health, and we're not, we had a webinar a few weeks back, the neuroscience of stress, which Matt led, but it was just really interesting to hear that we aren't going to be the same person when we left work, returning to work. So we've completely changed since we've all left and started working from home. And so going back to work, we have to start thinking about putting people's mental health first and thinking about their well-being, as well as like physical safety too. So it's a very good point. Gemma, I already know kind of how we are planning to return to work, but if you'd like to share what's going on, how the future work is going to look for the Happiness Index.
So yeah, it's similar to you, Lalita, and I'm sure a number of other people on the call as well, that we are not planning to return to the office in the immediate future. And similar to what Matt's already alluded to, we've also did a survey. We've asked our people, we've listened to our people and heard the concerns that they have about not necessarily being in an office together, because we're actually all really looking forward to a time when we can all come together and meet up, even if it is at a socially distanced space. But we are really looking forward to actually coming back together as a group. But it's about more so, I think it was more around actually getting to the office and the public transport situation. So we're taking all of the feedback from our people on board, and at the moment we don't think that it's the right thing to do to offer the office as a viable place to work from. We're in a shared office building, so that also brings its complexities. It's not, we could, have our own really great plans and risk assessments and tick all the boxes that we think we're doing everything right, but we're also going to be at the mercy of our landlords, who are great landlords. I'm sure they're going to do everything they can to ensure everyone in the building's safe, but there are a number of other tenants there as well. So, and there's a lot of shared areas, so that brings up a whole host of complexities that could potentially be out of our hands. So yes, at the moment we very much see our, for the foreseeable future, continuing working remotely and meeting up virtually with one another and with our clients as well. And going back to the point you made, Matt, about that company talking about the managers should be role models of going back to the office. Being a role model for your staff isn't about the location where you choose to work. It's about showing how to do your job really well and act with integrity, and how you work with one another and the output that you produce. So that's, to me, is how those managers can be the best role model they can to the rest of that organisation. It's not about whether they decide to go into the office or go wherever they go.
Yeah. Gemma, just a follow-up question on that, because for those that don't know, Gemma and I have worked together twice, so I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for Gemma, but One of the things on the leader's point on setting an example, I remember you really encouraged working mums to always leave on time and set a positive example. And I remember Corinne Edwards as an example. People used to cheer her out of the office. How did you go about? Because it's easy to say that, isn't it? But how did you go about capturing that to change the behaviour? Because there's a lot of people, it's just a hangover, isn't it, from the old days of thinking, oh, you have to be present to be a leader. But how do you change that mindset?
Well, I don't think it wasn't really too difficult, to be honest, because I was fortunate enough to work with people like yourself and other leaders who was of a similar opinion and who was very like-minded. So it wasn't that, you know, there was lots of dinosaurs in a boardroom that I had to convince that this was a good thing to do. It came very naturally, I think, to me and also to other people that I worked with. So when you just, you know, broach the subject that this person, we should be doing what we can for this person because they've got a little boy at home, then everyone was like, yeah, actually, you're right. We should be making sure they're out the door on time. They don't need to be working late, and it's not necessary. They're productive enough the time that they're here in the office, so it's time to go home now to their little one.
Thanks, Gemma.
I just want to add to that, and it's completely off topic, so I won't spend too long on it. But
we like off topic, Lalita. It's good.
Like off topic. You know me, I'll distract anyone. There's like two sides to it. There's the company and the business side of, do we support that individual leaving at that time for whatever their responsibility is? But as a parent myself, and as somebody that absolutely loves working, you know, I really, you know, somewhat addicted to my work. I struggle with that leaving, not because I feel that the company won't respect me for it or don't support me for it, because I don't want to. It's kind of this inner feeling that I have. And I think lots of parents or people with responsibilities outside quite often feel that connection to their work. So it's also about, it goes back to that mental health, giving parents or others the opportunity to tap into support where they can talk through some of this stuff and actually deal with it themselves, because it tends to be much deeper than just, oh, I feel guilty not working, or I feel guilty not being with my child. It tends to stem in things like perfectionism or needing to get feedback from individuals as being seen as successful. So some of that stuff. So I see, even though sometimes it's personal, there is still sometimes a responsibility, I think, for businesses to enable individuals to get support with some of those personal grapples they have.
Totally. There's a lot of guilt that people feel, isn't there? Whatever way around it is. So yeah, you're right. There's so many personal things you need to work on.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think, following on from your question, Matt, that having the flexibility to work when it suits you best is, in the situation that Matt was referring to with our old colleague Corinne. If you wanted to or needed to leave earlier or early, then it didn't matter. Or if if it suited you better to leave a bit earlier and then go home and then do a bit in the evening. I know that suits me sometimes too, to be in the office for a shorter time. And then, if I want to, like what you're saying, Lalita, you get sucked in and you want to finish what it is you're doing and you want to be immersed in the project that you're working on. And then if I choose to pick it back up again in the evening, once I've done bath and bed and dinner and all of that, then I've got the option to do that because we're set up to work in that agile way. So I think that that's really important as well. And then, sorry, I have got another point as well. Coming back to your original question, Rosie, sorry, you won't be able to shut me up now. This is why
no, that's okay.
Before.
We've got some time still.
So before we got onto the meeting properly, Lalita, you were saying that actually you're thriving in lockdown. And I think that that's another reason why the happiness index isn't in any rush to go back to the office, because actually this new way of working, new world, what everyone likes to call it, does suit quite a few people. So we're just not in a rush to go back to the old way and to find our feet in this new situation we're in and see what works best for everybody, really.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about it a couple of PJs ago, but in the data that Caroline crunched, we saw quite often at the bottom of the happiness of professions, which lots of you have heard us say before, is HR professionals. But also at the bottom quite often is engineers. But in our data, we've seen engineers' happiness rise rapidly. And I think that's potentially to do with the open plan office and introverts, which is the open plan office works for a lot of people, but if you're introverted, it doesn't. So I think there's a lot of engineers, which Lalita and Gemma both are responsible for. I'm guessing on Lalita's side, but I know on Gemma's side. So we've probably got quite introverted workforces that are thriving in that new environment. But there's probably some extrovert, maybe estate agents, as an example, that might be really missing that. So it is a personalised approach, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think you're spot on. At Deepmind, they're predominantly engineers, software engineers, researchers, and what we're seeing is productivity increase. Like, this is, for a researcher, the best situation to be in, to be able to get up and continue to research. And one thing that we're having to really communicate and really share is, you know, get up off your desk, take breaks, don't work the hours that you usually would, because what we find is you're just not moving. I don't move sometimes. And I was thinking, and we were talking earlier about everyone being in scarves and hoodies. I've been getting quite cold, even though it's warm, because I just haven't moved out of my chair for a number of hours. And that is, but it's dangerous. You know, that's where potentially people work too much. And it's not necessarily because they're not empowered to not work that much. It's because they love it and that's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking that about the office desk, whether it's your desk at home or desk at home. And I say this even though our chair at the Happiness Index runs an ergonomic furniture company. But if you think about like a person sitting at a desk with a laptop, you couldn't design a worse way for a human being to work, could you? It's so unnatural. I know it was only 11 weeks ago that we were all doing that, but it just seems bizarre that that's how you would work.
Also, wearing jeans, who thought that was a good idea to wear those to work? Trousers all the way from now on.
Or your pajamas.
Exactly.
I haven't worn jeans for about 11 weeks.
Me either.
I
haven't either. I am wearing pants. I'm just not wearing jeans. It hurts.
I will say though that I personally have worked out more than I've ever worked out before, and like my physical health is probably at an absolute high because I never used to find much time to do it before. So I should still be able to get into my jeans is where I'm going with this.
I think it's helpful at the end of the day too, like after you have been sitting around so much and focusing in on what you're doing. Like I'm hyper focusing on what I do because I'm not getting up and reminding myself to just like take breaks and stuff. So having that just like run right out the door, out on a run right away is really helpful to just shut off at the end of the day and kind of separate work from, okay, I have the rest of the night off. So just let some steam off in that way. So being able to focus more on running is nice.
The lines definitely can get very blurred, so it's really important to, like you said, if you can go for a run. I know Matt likes to walk to work in the mornings, so that you can try and separate your day. Or if people read usually on the commute to work, then you should set an alarm and pick your book up at 5 o'clock or whatever you would normally do when you're going to catch a train. So
definitely
to try and help with that routine.
Yeah, that leads well into my next question for you both. So as we continue working while we're in lockdown, what are some ways that your organization has helped with keeping employees engaged, but not too engaged to the point where they're burning out and that they're feeling exhausted? And I know like Zoom exhaustion is a thing that's kind of risen that a lot of people are feeling. And I know I have experienced myself. So what are ways that you're kind of being mindful of that? Gemma, if you'd like to start.
Well, I think we've been talking about it quite recently, actually, and basically just keep encouraging people to take time off. We've had a bank holiday recently, but I know before that we was very vocal about making sure that our communication and our messaging to people was that yes, this is a tough time and we're all working really hard and there's lots to do, we're very busy, it's all very positive stuff, but that doesn't mean that you should feel guilty for taking some time off and not going on holiday, but having that holiday from work. I know Matt and a couple of the other people in the leadership team have taken some time off. One of the co-founders is off this week. It's half term, so his kids won't be doing their homeschooling this week. So it's just very important that we keep sharing those stories with one another and encouraging people to take that time for themselves. Also, if anyone's on furlough, we was talking about rotating people in and out of certain teams so that people can maybe have a bit of a break in that way if we thought that that was a better option. So yeah, I think it just comes back to keep talking to people, and the more that you are connected to your people, then you will be able to tell whether they need that break and whether they're hopefully not on the verge of burning out, but if they're just, you know, a bit tired and need a bit of a break, then you'll be able to have that conversation with them.
But that Gemma's point there on Tony, our co-founder, that came from him because none of the co-founders had taken a holiday. And then we realised that no one else was taking holiday, and we realised unless we take holiday, nobody's going to take holiday. Because it goes back to Lalita's point about setting an example, doesn't it? Even taking a holiday is an example that needs to be done.
But also, I don't think that just by the leaders or the co-founders taking holiday is necessarily setting an example, because I think that some people would think, oh, well, it's all right for them because that's the owner of the business. I think it comes hand in hand with the messaging that goes with it to say, look, I'm having this time out because I'm knackered, I've been doing this and this, and the kids are off that week, so I'm going to have this week off. Why don't you take a long weekend, or why don't you use some of your days to do something similar? So I think it's both sides.
So are you saying Kevin, having spent the last 3 weeks on his yacht, is not sending out the right signal to his employees?
Depends how many selfies he's been sending them during that period.
Thanks, Gemma.
Do you know, a lot of the same as what Gemma has said, really. I think, firstly, working from home and particularly doing video conferences like at home is really tiring. It's more tiring. So if anything's going to lead to burnout, it's that physical kind of need to constantly be on and engaged. It's so different when you're in person having a conversation. You just can't seem to relax on video conference. It's the same for Deepmind. Kind of messaging around expectations has been particularly helpful, I think, for Deepminders. Just like even being able to say, you know, we don't expect you to be meeting your output. Every manager, we went through an exercise of coaching them to go through all of their objectives and key results and what was expected of them by the end of this year, and scale back what wasn't the priority and just looking at what is realistic, what can their teams do, what can individuals do. And we've put a little bit of onus on the individuals to come back to managers to say, well, what do you believe you can do, you know, by the end of H2? Because it depends on the personal circumstances. Again, you know, a parent that's having to homeschool their kids, you know, imagine this, you've got a single parent who's looking after their child and they're trying to work. They're not going to be able to have the same output as somebody who is living as a single individual with no responsibilities or different responsibilities. So we're now looking much more at what the individual can achieve rather than looking at the more holistic team achievements, which I think has landed really, really well, because you can actually connect with that as a person. What that has meant, though, for us is that we've really had to spend a lot of time working with managers. So we've put in lots more training, lots more coaching, a lot more one-to-one time with their HR representative, their HR business partners, to help managers articulate some of this and also change their minds a little bit if they're not necessarily behind that themselves. So really explaining why it's important to do this now to prevent burnout. And we've put a lot of materials, resources together, talks together from a well-being angle, really explaining kind of the impact that burnout has not only on the individual but to a team or to the company, to try to take that slightly scientific side of it, because that really lands at Deepmind, kind of really understanding the why and the how. We have also been doing surveys to really kind of get a pulse and a check on people's productivity and how they feel they're doing. And if people are feeling like they're not that productive, we're then kind of tailoring comms to say it's okay not to feel productive. That is totally expected during this time. Forgive yourself lots. We've talked a lot about forgiving yourself, which sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I think if you can get it right, that's exactly what people need to do during this pandemic, is forgive themselves in relation to their work, home. You know, couples are probably rowing, kids are probably being a nightmare, the house probably isn't as tidy as it normally is. That's okay, it's a pandemic, it's never happened before. What else? We've really ramped up, I would say, the awareness around well-being. And I think that is the way that we're going to crack avoiding burnout, kind of getting ahead of it before it happens.
Lalita, you know that stuff that you're talking about there, which is obviously, how much of it do you think is going to help in the future? Because there's so much talk of mental health, mental awareness, well-being that has been even more now. Do you think that's going to help Deepmind in the future?
Yeah, I think hugely. I think it's almost the kind of stepping stones into opening up this conversation into day-to-day parlance. We're going to be able to talk about this as the norm. I think what's been quite successful as well is we've had some of our leaders share anecdotes as to what's just not been working for them at home and how they've been able to take time out and step back, and using, it's what Gemma was saying, kind of using those messages as empowerment tools rather than I can do it. We've really acknowledged that just because a leader's doing it doesn't mean others can do it as well. So I think it's the same when it comes to well-being. The more we can talk about it at all levels across the business as openly as possible, the more we'll be able to get ahead of some of this stuff in the future. What I would love to see across businesses is, you know, individuals being able to stand up and say, this is my situation, this is what's going on with me, this is what's helped, there's probably some more help that I need. Can we create a network and a community amongst ourselves? That is what I think is probably Deepmind's future. So creating an open community where people can come in and talk about their mental health, what works, what doesn't work, sharing therapy stories, etc. And I do think it's lockdown that's opened up that door.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks for that, both. Those are all my questions I have for today. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to shout some out now if you'd like.
Whilst everyone's thinking, I've got another Deepmind question for Lalita. What was it, because you've been like, about half the time you've worked there, you were in the normal world, and half in whatever we want to call this world. What was it like being onboarded at Deepmind and Google, and what's it like you're onboarding people now? So two questions for one.
My onboarding was really phenomenal. Deepmind have put a lot of thought and effort into how you integrate an individual into their culture. So my onboarding was still happening when we went into lockdown effectively. They don't expect you to be fully ramped up easily for 3 to 6 months into your role. There is zero expectation. They don't really have probation periods. So I was thinking, I actually asked the questions like, did I pass my probation period? It's like, oh, well, we don't have them. We have such a rigorous interview process that we would hope to catch anything there. I actually lead the onboarding team at Deepmind. So what we had to do very, very quickly, as soon as there was a sniff that lockdown would happen, was go into contingency planning mode. We were literally kind of 8-9 hours a day, 5 of us in a room, really trying to work out how we onboard people. And it's not just a simple matter of we're just going to run it remotely. We have to think about the Google processes that underpin how we get people their tech, how we get people to transfer from another country into this country. So we were, you know, talking to immigration people, we are trying to work out tax situations, doing all of this kind of quite meaty stuff. And when you think about it, I was thinking, I thought onboarding was just getting people into the business and making sure that they knew what they were meant to do, and it was a great fun thing. So what we had to do was we came up with reams and reams of like material and documents, guidance notes, recruitment guidance notes for the immigration team on what we have to do. Now, what we did was bare minimum first. How do we just get somebody their laptop ready to work? One. We then moved into a second phase of how do we culturally onboard people. It was taking us 2 to 3 weeks to get people their laptop. So we were getting them onto payroll. They weren't doing anything, not even having a decent conversation with their manager at first. People were really understanding. So
Lisa, that makes us all feel better, because the fact that Google sell laptops and you were struggling to get them makes everyone else on here feel better.
yeah, exactly. You know, you mark somebody as peer 0, they're absolutely urgent, they must get a laptop. It was still taking 10 days. In short, we moved over to the cultural piece. How do we now kind of really bring somebody into the culture? And it's so tough doing that over video conference, but I think I think all of us probably in business have been quite successful at is actually saying to individuals, this isn't our best and we promise to make it better when you come into the office, but we're trying our best. So what we did was increase the one-to-ones, share as many materials as possible, try and bring people into exactly this type of forum, really encourage conversation, getting people to connect with each other, talking about the values. Yes, okay, that's great, but you need people to feel the value. So really shouting out where an individual can be effectively feeling that value. So some of our values are innovation, being innovative, pioneering. So kind of showcasing some of that by case studies, etc. So it's been a huge piece of work, but I've got the most amazing team. Like truly, I'm so grateful for them. They were so creative and very, very quickly. And when we say quickly, we had the next intake due to come within a week, and we had to email everyone to say, you can't come into the office, can't do this, cancel your flights, you're going to have to go into self-quarantine because you're coming from an impacted country. Sorry, I'm totally going off topic, but
that's so interesting. Please carry on.
It's been successful. In short, we've sent out some surveys to anyone that's been with us for 8 weeks or so, and they've all said how grateful they are for the time and effort that we've put in. But the benefit is there's a team of 5 specifically looking at onboarding. In some, you know, in my previous company, that wasn't even a percentage of time in one person's role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our time's up, Rosie, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Lalita and Gemma, so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. I'll send around a follow-up to everybody. But thanks again for those of you who are joining for the first time and those of you who are joining every week. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, Gemma.
Bye. Lovely to see you.